She hadn't planned on stopping at the ranch. The storm decided that for her. Rain fell in heavy sheets, blurring the road until the world narrowed to the sweep of her headlights and the pounding of her heart. When the engine sputtered, panic rose sharp in her chest. Then she saw it, an old farmhouse standing steady against the wind, lights glowing warm like a promise. By the time she reached the porch, her clothes were soaked, her hands trembling as she knocked. The door opened almost immediately. He filled the frame, tall, broad-shouldered, his presence calm in a way that made the chaos outside feel distant. He took one look at her and stepped aside. "Come in," he said, his voice low and even. When she hesitated, he added softly, "Just relax. You'll be fine." The words settled over her like a blanket, easing something tight inside her chest. Inside, the house smelled of wood, coffee, and rain-soaked earth. He handed her a towel, then another when he saw her still shivering. As she dried her hair, she felt his eyes on her, not intrusive, just aware. When he guided her toward a chair near the fire, his hand rested briefly at her back. The touch was firm, grounding, and unexpectedly reassuring. She hadn't realized how badly she needed that until her breath finally slowed. They talked in fragments at first, about the storm, the road, how she'd never driven this far out before. He listened without interrupting, nodding as if every word mattered. When the lights flickered, she flinched, embarrassment flushing her cheeks. He didn't comment. He simply moved a little closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him beside her. "I don't do well with storms," she admitted, surprising herself with the honesty. "I know," he replied gently, as if it were the most natural thing in the world to understand. "You're safe here." The rain battered the windows, but the fire crackled steadily. He poured her a mug of coffee, his movements unhurried, practiced. When he handed it to her, their fingers brushed again. This time neither pulled away immediately. It was a small moment, almost nothing, but it lingered, changing the air between them. She noticed the lines at the corners of his eyes when he smiled, the quiet strength in the way he moved through the room. This place felt lived in, not lonely, like someone who had chosen solitude rather than been abandoned by it. When she asked why he stayed so far from town, he shrugged. "Some people like noise," he said. "Some people like space." Another flicker of lightning lit the room, briefly painting his face in silver and shadow. She realized then that the way he held her attention wasn't forceful or flashy. It was steady, patient. As the storm raged on, she leaned back in the chair, exhaustion finally catching up with her. He placed another log on the fire and glanced at her, concern soft in his eyes. "Get some rest," he said. "The storm will pass." She believed him, not just about the weather, but about everything. Morning arrived quietly, as if the storm had taken all the noise with it when it left. Pale sunlight slipped through the windows, touching the wooden floor and the edges of the furniture. She woke on the couch with a blanket tucked around her shoulders, confused for a moment before memory settled in. The rain, the ranch, the man with the calm voice. The house was still but not empty. Somewhere nearby, she could hear the low clink of a mug being set down, the soft sound of footsteps. She sat up just as he appeared in the doorway, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He paused when he saw she was awake, a small smile crossing his face. "Morning," he said, like it was any other day and not the aftermath of a night that had shifted. Something subtle but important. He handed her a cup, careful not to spill, his fingers warm when they brushed hers. That familiar steadiness returned, easing the last of her unease. They ate breakfast at the small wooden table, sunlight growing stronger as the hours moved on. Conversation came easier now. She told him about her life in the city, how everything felt rushed there, how silence made her uncomfortable because it left too much room for thoughts she preferred to ignore. He listened the same way he had the night before, without judgment, without trying to fix anything. When she asked about him, he hesitated, then spoke about the ranch, about choosing land over people after learning that not everyone stays. After breakfast, she offered to help with anything before she left. He nodded and handed her a pair of gloves. Outside, the world smelled fresh, clean, as if the storm had washed it new. They worked side by side, repairing a loose section of fence. She wasn't used to physical work. and he noticed her struggling before she said a word. He showed her how to brace herself, his hands guiding hers briefly, respectfully. "Easy," he said, his voice low. "Let the post take the weight." At one point, her foot slipped on the damp ground. Instinctively, he reached out, catching her at the waist. She gasped more from surprise than fear, and for a heartbeat they stayed like that, too close, breathing the same air. His grip was secure, protective, never pressing more than necessary. "I've got you," he murmured. The words settled deep, echoing louder than they should have. She laughed softly when she found her balance again, brushing dirt from her hands. But something had changed. The casual closeness lingered unspoken. When they finished the fence, they stood in the open field, the land stretching endlessly around them. For the first time in a long while, she felt no urge to rush back to the noise she'd come from. She glanced at the road that would eventually lead her back home and realized leaving no longer felt urgent. Whatever had begun the night before wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, and growing, like the land itself, patient and waiting. The afternoon drifted by more slowly than she expected, as if time itself had decided to soften its pace out here. Clouds moved lazily across the sky, and the ranch settled into a rhythm that felt older than urgency. She told herself she should leave soon, that staying longer would only complicate things. Yet every small moment seemed to anchor her in place. When he asked if she wanted to walk the far edge of the property, she agreed, before thinking it through. They followed a narrow path through tall grass, the wind brushing against their legs. He walked beside her, close enough that she could feel his presence without being crowded by it. Now and then, he pointed out small details she would have missed. The way the fence, line curved with the land, the distant hills that turned blue in the afternoon light. Listening to him, she realized how deeply he belonged to this place, how the quiet had shaped him into someone solid and sure. At the edge of the property, they stopped near an old oak tree. He leaned against it, arms crossed loosely, and watched the horizon. She studied him in the open daylight, noticing things the firelight had hidden the night before, the calm in his expression, the trace of something guarded behind his eyes. When she asked if he ever got lonely, he didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a breath, slow and deliberate. "Sometimes," he said finally, "but loneliness isn't always the worst thing. It teaches you what matters." His honesty caught her off guard. She nodded, understanding more than she expected to. Without thinking, she sat on a low rock near him, close enough that their knees almost touched. The space between them felt deliberate now, charged with things neither of them were rushing to name. On the walk back, the wind picked up, cooler than before. She rubbed her arms, and he noticed immediately. He shrugged out of his jacket and draped it over her shoulders, his hands lingering just long enough to make her pulse jump. "You don't have to pretend you're tougher than you are," he said quietly. "Not here." The words settled deep. No one had said that to her in a long time. As the house came back into view, she slowed her steps, reluctant to break the moment. Inside, the air felt warmer, the quiet heavier. She set his jacket on the chair but didn't move away. For a moment they simply stood there, facing each other, the world outside forgotten. "This is new for me," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. He met her gaze, eyes steady but gentle. "I know." The way he held her then was careful, respectful, yet filled with meaning, like he understood the weight of the moment and refused to rush it. They stayed like that, breathing in sync, until the light outside began to fade. Nothing else happened, and yet everything had changed. In the quiet of the room, she realized this connection wasn't about the storm that had brought her here. It was about the stillness that followed, and the trust growing quietly between them. The morning she finally decided to leave arrived with a clarity that felt almost cruel. The sky was wide and blue, the kind that made promises it couldn't keep. She stood by the window for a long moment, watching the land stretch out in every direction, committing the quiet to memory. Behind her, the house stirred to life. She heard his footsteps, slow and familiar, and the soft scrape of a chair being pulled back. They didn't talk much while she packed her things. Words felt unnecessary, too heavy for the fragile calm between them. He poured coffee, set it on the table the way he always did, steady, careful. When he handed her the mug, their fingers met, and this time neither pretended it was an accident. She looked up at him, searching his face for something she couldn't quite name. "You don't have to rush," he said, reading her hesitation easily. "I know," she replied, though they both understood that staying wasn't really an option. Not yet. Outside, the truck waited by the gate. The road beyond it looked ordinary again, as if it hadn't nearly broken her just days before. She slung her bag over her shoulder, heart heavier than it should have been for someone she'd known such a short time. He walked with her in silence, the crunch of gravel loud beneath their steps. At the gate she stopped. He did too. For a moment neither moved. Then he reached out, resting his hand lightly on her arm, not to stop her, just to be there. "Whatever you choose next," he said, "make sure it's something that feels right, not just familiar." She swallowed, emotion tightening her throat. "You make it sound easy." He smiled, that quiet, knowing smile she'd come to recognize. "Nothing important ever is." She stepped closer, drawn by something stronger than caution. When she rested her forehead against his chest, he wrapped his arms around her without hesitation. The embrace was warm, steady, full of unspoken understanding. The way he held her felt like a promise he wasn't, saying out loud that he would go slow, that he would never take more than she was willing to give. "Just relax," he murmured near her hair. "You'll be fine." She laughed softly, the sound breaking through her tears. "You really believe that, don't you?" "I do," he said. "And if you ever need a place where the world quiets down, you know where to find me." They pulled apart slowly, neither eager to be the first to let go. She climbed into the truck, starting the engine with trembling hands. He stepped back, giving her space even now. As she drove away, she glanced in the mirror and saw him standing there, calm and unmoving, part of the land itself. Miles down the road, not all connections demand immediate answers. Some are meant to linger, to grow in the spaces between meetings and time. The ranch faded behind her, but the feeling he'd given her, the safety, the patience, the quiet strength, stayed. And for the first time in a long while, she wasn't afraid of where the road might lead next.